Hello, thank you for joining us today. My name's Ben Wilting and I'm with the Amarillo Public Library. This is part 8 of our 13-part series designed to help you obtain citizenship in the United States. Today we will be covering questions 64 through 73 for the civics portion of your citizenship test. All of today's questions will cover early American history. Stay tuned. Today we continue our discussion on early American history, where we find out about the American Revolution as well as the Founding Fathers. Okay, let's get started with session 8. Today we're going to be continuing early American history. We're going to cover questions 64 through 73. Again, these questions can be found in the description below on our website, amarillolibrary.org. They're the same questions that you can find on uscis.gov. They're just in a little bit different order, which is easier for us to teach. Okay, number 64. What happened at the Constitutional Convention? Answer: the Constitution was written, or the Founding Fathers wrote the Constitution. This is a real easy question if you think about it. What happened at the Constitutional Convention? They wrote the Constitution. So just know that for this question, just pay attention to Constitutional Convention. The answer is they wrote the Constitution. And when was the Constitution written? 1787. 1787. Now, this is a difficult question for a lot of people. Sometimes they get this confused with the Declaration of Independence, which was signed in 1776. If you stop and think about this question for just a moment, just try to remember that the Declaration of Independence has to be signed first. We have to declare ourselves a free country before we can start laying the framework for that country. And that's what the Constitution does. Okay, so 1776 has to be the Declaration of Independence, whereas 1787, 11 years later, has to be the Constitution. Okay, 1787. Number 66. There were 13 original states. Name 3. This is a difficult question for some people because they have a hard time remembering 3. So I'm going to run down all of them and then I'm going to group a few of these to make it a little easier. So the complete list is New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia. Okay, those were the original 13 colonies. Now, little trick to remember 3. Sometimes it's easy for people to remember the 3 news. New Hampshire, New York, New Jersey. Okay. If those seem like easy ones to remember, jot them down, and as you study those 3. Okay. Another grouping that some people find easier to study: North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, or Georgia. One of those 2. For whatever reason, grouping those 4 together seems to be an easy logical grouping for a lot of people. Okay. But whatever you pick, make sure you write those 3 down and study those 3. This is just like the questions where you're only required to name 1. You don't want to name 4 or 5 and get one wrong. Write down 3, study those 3, and when you go into your test, be prepared to answer those 3 states. Number 67. The Federalist Papers supported the passage of the Constitution. Name one of the writers. So the answers that we have here: James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and John Jay. You could also answer Publius. Publius was the name that they gave. It was a fake name, a pen name, so that people didn't know who wrote the papers. The actual writers are James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, John Jay. But Publius is also an acceptable answer. Okay, so just memorize one of those. John Jay is a very easy name to remember, a short name, but whatever one jumps out at you the most, study that one. Okay. 68. What is one thing Benjamin Franklin is famous for? There are several answers you can give beyond what's listed here. However, I would suggest that you stick to one of these answers. They're a lot simpler and easier to remember than other things you can look up about Ben Franklin. So the first one was, Ben Franklin was a U.S. diplomat. He was the oldest member of the Constitutional Convention. He was the first Postmaster General of the United States. He wrote the Poor Richard's Almanac. He started the first free libraries. And he is on the $100 bill. The $100 bill. So, if any of these jump out at you, I'm with a library, so starting the first free library is something that would jump out to me. But for a lot of people, him being on the $100 bill is a pretty big thing. Any of those options below, write that down and study it. Okay, number 69. Who was the first president of the United States? George Washington. George Washington. And number 70. Who was the father of our country? George Washington. George Washington, for the most part, is a very beloved figure in American history. In the American Revolution, he was a general. He led the military against the British. He was very competent in that. And after the war was over, a lot of people looked to him as a natural to be the first leader of the country. That's a lot of responsibility and a lot of power for someone. And the reason why he is so beloved, or one of the reasons, is because he handled that power and that responsibility with very wisely, with a lot of dignity. He handled it very well. When we didn't have, before we had a president, no one knew what to call him. Did they want to call him a king? Were you going to kneel when you saw him or call him your majesty? And when he was selected as the first president, George Washington came up with a lot of the customs that we still stand by today. Calling him Mr. President, not bowing or kneeling to him, or kissing his hand. The handshake is fine. There's a lot of customs and precedents that George Washington set that we still see today. The 2 terms, that was something that George Washington, after his second term, he stepped down. He chose to leave office. And that became a tradition that for the most part, has been upheld throughout United States history, that most presidents haven't served more than 2 terms. So, George Washington set a lot of those customs, a lot of those traditions. Number 71. What is the name of the national anthem? Our national anthem is the Star-Spangled Banner. The Star-Spangled Banner. It was written by Francis Scott Key. He wrote it during a battle. I guess he drafted the first copy during a battle. So a lot of the lines that you see in our national anthem were descriptive of what he was actually seeing, which is very interesting. In the description, we have a performance of the national anthem at the Super Bowl, performed by Whitney Houston. This is a very famous performance of the national anthem, considered by many to be one of the best performances of our national anthem. So, if you'd like to see that, check it out in the description below. Number 72. What territory did the United States buy from France in 1803? The Louisiana Purchase, or the Louisiana Territory. We purchased this from France, from Napoleon. France needed money quick. They needed it quickly. And Thomas Jefferson knew that it was a good deal. It wasn't a popular decision at the time with a lot of people, but it was a decision he made and pushed for. So that is how we got the Louisiana Territory from France. So that's the territory that we purchased from France in 1803. Okay. Number 73. Name one war fought by the United States in the 1800s. One war fought by the United States in the 1800s. There's the War of 1812, the Mexican-American War, the Civil War, and the Spanish-American War. Now, if none of these jump out at you, I would suggest remembering the Civil War. We're going to have a few more questions about that coming up in our next session. So, the Civil War was possibly the most important war in United States history, definitely one of the most important wars. So I think that would be the one to try to study and remember if none of these jump out at you. If one of these seems easier than the others, you can certainly select it and learn that war for this question. But for most people, I think Civil War will be the easiest answer. Thank you for joining us for part number 8. Join us next time for part number 9, where we cover questions 74 to 87. See you next time.